This morning, I'd like to celebrate the moon, which is a departure from my normal celebrations of people and events. Um, but it's funny, today I really felt that I wanted to honour the moon, which obviously is perceived as an inanimate object. And I'm not even saying that it isn't. Well, I mean, clearly it's moving through the sky, but it's as to whether or not it has a consciousness is a very profound question. And, there are people like Rupert Sheldrake who are, and many other people, scientists, many scientists among them, and philosophers who are considering the idea of um, panpsychism, the idea that, which is really a very old idea, that everything has consciousness embedded in it, or that everything is consciousness. These are very profound questions that we can't answer. So, to talk of honouring the moon may seem like a little strange at first glance. And I'm not going to make any presumptions about whether the moon is a conscious being, but I feel like it's still worthy of note and giving thanks for, because our planet and our lives would not be the same without it. That being said, as I understand it, there are cultures who have a very long oral tradition who can remember a time before the moon. It's difficult to know what kind of credence to give this kind of story, but it certainly would make sense of a lot of things if the moon arrived in orbit around the planet whilst humans were still here. There are a lot of anomalies regarding the moon that make it seem a very strange heavenly body to understand. Again, whether or not that's true, I don't know. I love being embedded in the mystery of life. I don't have to be able to know. I don't have to be able to say, oh, well, the moon has been there for this much time and it's blah, 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 blah. For me, I look up into the sky and it's that thing, that massive thing that is constantly moving through the sky, changing its shape according to the shadow of the earth. That seems to be fairly easy to distinguish. And yeah, and it has these effects. Now, it's interesting to me that scientists who will go, yes, the Earth is spinning around the body, and the moon is spinning around the Earth, and the moon's gravitational fields are such that, or the Earth's gravitational field is such that the moon is held in orbit, and the gravity of the moon affects the tides, affects the water moving around the planet, and that's why we have tides. And yet, we as watery beings, biologists and other scientists will commonly state that we're somewhere between 60 and 90% water. And I mean, clearly we are watery beings. The way our faces move, the way our bodies move, we are fluid creatures. We're not silicon. We're carbon-based life forms made of water that flow and, or at least have the capacity to. Our feelings are watery. They move through us. They flow. Yeah, we're not like these silicon-based creatures, computers that are hard and brittle and yeah. So how come that the moon affects the waters of the tides, but it doesn't affect us as watery beings? And I mean, you only have to talk to anybody who's a nurse that's ever worked in A&E to know that we are clearly affected by the moon. The number of accidents and the police, the number of violent incidents that occur on full moons is beyond anybody's doubt. So clearly the moon, this piece of rock that is apparently just orbiting this planet in some nonchalant, I am not affecting anything kind of way, is clearly not just affecting the tides, but all of us in different ways. The moon has this incredible property of being the same size from our perspective as the sun, and the relationship it has between them and I mean it's a very unlikely thing probabilistically in terms of why that would be, that this fiery body so far away should be exactly the same size to our perception here on Earth as the moon, this other cold body that is orbiting our planet much closer. It's a strange thing, and there's all sorts of mathematical relationships which are almost, sorry, so bright, that are almost inexplicable. They are inexplicable. There's no real explanation for why these certain ratios and distances all pan out the way they do. One of the other things that one just cannot ignore about the moon is the relationship it has with, I mean, we call our months moons. Of course, we should have 13 months because we have 13 moons. And half of the planet is profoundly affected by the movements of the moon, because the women of this planet, their cycles, for some reason, seem to line up with the rotation of the moon about every 28 days, although many women today, like all human beings, are so out of sync with the natural rhythms of nature and the forests and the natural cycles of seasons that we're probably all way out of whack. So that's probably not as true for women today as it once was. At least that's my suspicion. But the moon, therefore, is this body that represents such mystery on so many levels. I mean, one of the things that really gets me about the moon is, I mean, it's interesting, in recent years there's been, a huge amount of debate as to whether or not we actually went and landed on the moon. And, I certainly went through a moment of doubting it completely, going, you see footage, you see shadows of flags, and there are things that don't seem right. And it does seem that Stanley Kubrick did get involved in creating some kind of alternative footage, but there are things like there are mirrors on the moon that were placed there that astronomers have been bouncing light off and measuring distances with for quite a few decades now. So it seems to me very unlikely that that whole thing was a complete story, and yet it's still a mystery. There's still so many things about that don't fully make sense. So the moon is really quite an enigma, and it passes across the sky largely unnoticed every day. There it is. There it is, this thing that we don't fully understand and yet affects us, affects the tides, affects our emotions, affects the biological cycles of women. And not just the biological cycles, the cycles that give life. The aspect of women which is most connected to fertility and the continuation of life through their wombs, through their eggs. So the moon, I feel, is worthy of note today. Today is the new moon, and I've taken to having a ceremony on new moons with my partner, because when there are other strange things about the moon, that, like, when we cut our hair or fingernails on the new moon, they grow back less quickly than they would if you were to cut them on the full moon. And when you plant seeds, it's good to plant seeds on the new moon because for some reason they respond better. And it seems that they are aligning themselves with the cycles of nature. And in the same way, my partner and I, we we plant seeds of intentions for the coming month on the new moon. We just spend an evening to feel grateful for the things that have happened over the last month and the things that we're hoping will happen over the coming month. And it's funny because I don't really share that with many people, and we've done it since we've been together. It's been many years now, and it's something that it feels as though it helps. It's something that we enjoy doing, and so over the years I've come to be more and more in alignment with the moon, noticing the moon more and more, and yet still it's a total mystery. Uh, Most of what I know about the moon is completely second-hand, and I cannot verify it. What I can tell is that I've noticed in my own life that I'm a bit iffy on the full moon, that I've noticed in the garden how seeds respond differently at that time. I've noticed the emotions of the people around me and the cycles of my partners, and I've noticed the size of the moon and its mystery around the eclipses. And so, yes, a moment to give thanks for the moon and the role that it plays in our lives, largely unseen, and yet worthy of note. Here's to the moon.